While standard tech policies might cover data security, acceptable use of IT resources, and software licensing, an AI policy really has to address the unique challenges and capabilities of AI driven tech. While there's definitely overlap with conventional IT policies, AI systems require additional policy considerations.
The government doesn't want to be left behind in the AI revolution, but keeping up will require some strict policies and procedures. Welcome to Clarity on Tech, a podcast powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. I'm Zach Warren, the Institute's Technology and Innovation Insights lead. In each episode, we dive deep into the future of legal, corporate, tax accounting and audit, and government communities. Today, we explore how to create practical AI policies for federal agencies. What is different from a standard technology policy, and why should this be a strategic priority for today's government agencies? To explore the next steps, TRI's Rabia Butler speaks with Grace Cheng, Director of the Government Practice at Thomson Reuters Practical Law.
In today's world, AI is no longer a futuristic concept. It's rapidly transforming every corner of the public sector. From streamlining operations to informing critical decisions, AI presents federal agencies with both unprecedented opportunities and significant challenges that stretch far beyond the traditional IT management. The major question becomes, how do we harness the power of AI responsibly, ethically, and effectively within the government? Join us as we dive deep into AI policy and practice. We will be discussing why agencies urgently need to dedicate AI policies, what makes these policies fundamentally different from your standard tech guidelines, and the essential elements for every robust federal AI framework, what it should follow and contain. And we'll be doing this with Grace Cheng of Thomson Reuters Practical Law team. Grace is a director of government services at Practical Law, where she heads up a team of former federal and state and local government attorneys. Grace has over a decade of federal experience as first as the chief of government information law for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then as counsel for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, where she worked on information and privacy policy. Whether you're a policymaker, a technologist, or simply curious about the future of AI in government, tune in for a practical and principled look at building trustworthy and effective AI governance. Welcome, Grace, and I'm so happy to have you. Let's get started.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here to talk about AI policy and how AI is going to reshape the future work of federal agencies. Of course, given the pace of technological development in this space, I want to be careful to caveat that although we've done our best to make sure the information we're providing today is the most current available, AI is moving at an incredibly fast pace. So be sure you're working from the most recent information. That said, many of the issues we're going to be talking about today are policy issues that are a little bit more durable in nature.
And the one thing I always make sure I'm saying is we're not offering legal advice. We are simply offering thoughts on what comes next and clarifying what we think is going on currently. With that said, in an era where AI is fundamentally reshaping public service, what makes a dedicated, comprehensive AI policy a critical strategic necessity for agencies rather than just an extension of a current IT or data security plan? And how do these unprecedented ethical dilemmas and potential for bias and profound societal impact of AI demand a distinct policy framework to ensure responsible innovation and trust?
A specific policy around AI means establishing a dedicated governance framework that outlines the principles, rules, responsibilities, and procedures that speak to the specific qualities and risks of systems that rely on AI. This framework should really assist agencies in responsible and lawful development, procurement, deployment, and use of AI systems within an agency or department. It goes beyond general tech policies by acknowledging the unique capabilities, risks, and ethical considerations posed by AI. Government agencies really have to recognize that their use of AI is going to be held to a higher standard than some private sector uses, both in terms of ethical use, but also as it pertains to legal standards for using AI to inform the public and using AI to make decisions that affect the public. We're at a point in time now where the law is really trying to catch up with the tech. So being proactive in establishing good policies is really critical. For federal agencies, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, has issued guidance that's specific to AI systems that goes along with other statutes and regulations that would govern IT systems generally.
Now, a layperson might think this is just another piece of IT. But my question to you is, what is unique about AI policy that would be different from a standard technology policy? Like, why is it so important to have a very specific AI policy?
So, while standard tech policies might cover data security, acceptable use of IT resources, and software licensing, an AI policy really has to address the unique challenges and capabilities of AI driven tech. While there's definitely overlap with conventional IT policies, AI systems require additional policy considerations. I'm just going to speak really briefly about a lot of these points, but each one of these could be its own podcast. First and foremost, ethics. AI policies often explicitly incorporate ethical principles such as fairness, accountability, transparency, non discrimination, safety, and human oversight. Standard tech policies don't typically delve so deeply into ethics, but you can see why, with a computer driven system that's making decisions, it's particularly important to emphasize the ethical considerations. Data governance for AI is also different. Beyond just general data protection, AI policies really need to cover the quality, the provenance, the representativeness, and the potential biases of data that's used to train and operate AI models. This is really crucial to prevent discriminatory or inaccurate outcomes. Transparency is another point that's extremely important. AI policies should require efforts to make the AI decision making process as understandable as possible. It's not going to be possible to be completely transparent for every single application, but we should make those processes as transparent as possible for the risk level of the application. Human oversight is another important point. Giving the growing potential for AI to operate with some autonomy, policies really have to define the necessary levels of human involvement, review, and intervention, especially for high risk applications or those that affect individual rights and liberties. Testing, verification, and validation. AI systems require rigorous and ongoing testing, verification, and validation that goes beyond typical software testing. You can imagine AI by its very nature is a system that develops and learns on its own. That's what it's designed to do. And so those very qualities really make assessing performance, bias, robustness, and reliability under various conditions extremely important. Another point is risk assessment. AI really introduces some novel risks like algorithmic bias or unintended consequences from emergent behavior that necessitate specific risk assessment methodologies that go beyond standard IT risk assessments. AI policies should address these risks and provide guidance on how to mitigate them. Accountability is another point. Defining who is responsible when an AI system makes an error or causes harm is much more complex than traditional software. We really know that AI has the possibility of making mistakes, and we need to really establish clear lines of accountability from development through deployment and operation. There's also the typical procurement considerations and lifecycle management issues that should be taken into account.
I think the two things that stand out most to me of what you talked about are where humans belong in that decision making process and the risk assessment in general. Those two things alone are worth so much thought, and you can't just pay basic lip service to it. But as we discuss this, what essential elements do you think must be embedded in federal agency policy to ensure responsible development, deployment, and regulation of artificial intelligence in the US? And how can lawmakers strike a balance between innovation and safeguarding public interests?
So in April of 2025, OMB issued memo M2521, which is entitled Accelerating Federal Use of AI Through Innovation, Governance, and Public Trust. The memo really sets forth in broad terms the underpinnings of federal agency AI governance. Among other things, the memo requires agencies to assess their AI maturity goals, accelerate and scale AI adoption, including the creation of AI strategies that outline current and planned AI use cases, the assessment of the agency's current AI maturity. We've touched on many of those aspects already, such as the level of human oversight, testing, verification, and validation, and accountability for errors. And there are many additional aspects that should be included, including developing an AI infrastructure across the AI lifecycle that includes development, testing, deployment, and continuous monitoring. Designating who is responsible for public implementation, oversight, AI system development, procurement, risk assessment. For example, having a chief AI officer, governance boards, and system owners. Developing enterprise capacity for AI innovation, which include plans to recruit, hire, train, and retain an AI-ready workforce. We're going to return to the idea of an AI-ready workforce a couple of different times because it is such a critical piece of this puzzle. Detailing requirements for documenting AI systems and, where appropriate, providing explanations for their outputs, especially for decisions that affect the public or legal rights. This includes processes that incorporate input from end users and the public. We really need to establish a feedback loop that returns information to the agency about how the AI is performing in real world conditions. Policy should address the unique cybersecurity risks associated with AI systems, including model theft, data poisoning, and adversarial attacks. It's really cybersecurity, on steroids. So instead of what we might typically be afraid of, perhaps like a cyber attack that might result in, personally identifiable information being stolen, there's a heightened level of risk when you're talking about a cyber attack that might actually affect the way a system is making decisions. Again, outlining requirements for training personnel on the AI policy, ethical considerations, and the appropriate use of AI tools. Coming back to that idea of really establishing and retaining an AI-ready workforce. And finally, really creating procedures for addressing failures, errors, or unintended consequences of AI systems. This is really going to include monitoring, risk mitigation, and as well as remediation for when errors do occur. The agencies should be providing for regular review and updating of the policy to keep pace with technological advancements and evolving guidance from the government writ large. The OMB memo really encourages agencies to reuse AI code and models, include proactive sharing of models across the federal government. And agencies are also directed to release and maintain AI code as open source wherever legally possible. We've really only scratched the surface of these requirements, so I encourage you to give the OMB some careful review.
And I'm assuming you've done a lot of review on that OMB memo. You've given us a lot to think about. But as we dive deeper into these policies, it's obvious that no one person is going to be able to accomplish such a big objective. I mean, these are huge. It leads to one big question in my mind: who should be in the room to help develop these policies? And are there specific people, positions, or anything like that that we need to make sure are included in making these decisions?
Absolutely. Developing a robust AI policy really requires a multidisciplinary approach. The OMB memo M2521 does direct all agencies to retain or designate a chief AI officer by early June. So hopefully agencies are well on their way to completing this process. This position should form the cornerstone for the AI personnel for the agency. In addition to the chief AI officer, other players with a vital role in formulating policy include the Office of the General Counsel, the Office of the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Data Officer, ethics officials, privacy officials, the procurement office, human capital. Agencies should absolutely involve program offices that they think will be using the technology. This is important during the policy development phase for sure, but it's even more important as agencies develop procurement requirements. Consulting external experts as needed and appropriate as you go along the process. Larger departments are required by OMB to have AI governance boards that are required to include representatives from agency management, human capital, procurement, customer experience, program evaluation, and officials that are going to be responsible for implementing AI within that agency's program offices.
I think the two things there that really stand out are getting a really good chief AI officer and remembering that external experts are your friend and can be really appropriate to develop this robust program. But as we consider these things, how can federal agencies balance having a policy that is broad enough to cover AI, but also specific enough to be applicable to different uses, practice areas, especially given that Gen AI is so new and all of AI is constantly developing?
This is a really common challenge across private companies and governments worldwide. While it's not really possible to future proof an AI policy, there are ways to make it more adaptable. The most effective approach is to take a tiered or a hierarchical policy structure. So, at the first level, we want to create a high level document that really outlines the agency's fundamental values, ethical commitments, and strategic goals for AI. This is really going to be an evergreen document, not intended to change a lot. Um, as a second tier, agencies should create a core AI policy. Now, this document really establishes the foundational rules, roles, responsibilities, and a risk management framework that's going to be applicable to all AI systems within the agency. It would reference relevant executive orders, OMB memos, and any other statutory requirements. This core policy is going to be a little bit more flexible than that first tier high level document, and it can be amended as the government writ large adopts new guidance. As a third tier, it's a good idea to develop more detailed guidance or playbooks for specific categories of AI or high impact use cases. As an example, for Gen AI, that might include specific guidelines for drafting internal documents versus drafting public facing documents. There could be guidance for public facing chatbots and for attorneys doing legal research. This type of guidance will necessarily need to be flexible and modifiable as the technology advances. It's also really essential to consider the importance of ongoing measuring, monitoring, evaluation, and updating of AI policies. As AI technologies continue to evolve, agencies should regularly review and refine their policies to ensure that they may remain effective and relevant. The key here is to ground the policy in enduring principles like fairness and accountability, rather than try to mold a policy around a specific technology or a vendor product. Those things are going to change. What's here today may be obsolete by tomorrow. So we don't want to tie our policies into things that are that changeable. Defining a desired outcome, such as AI generated outputs must be verified for accuracy before dissemination, rather than dictating a specific technical method, is just going to make your AI policy a little more durable. Some specific steps agencies can take are to tie requirements to the level of risk posed by an AI application, regardless of the specific underlying technology. So a great example is that there are new Gen AI models being introduced, seemingly on a weekly basis, and a new Gen AI model might have different capabilities. But if it's used for a low risk task, it might not require significant policy changes, just a reassessment of its capabilities within the existing risk framework. So juxtapose that with introducing an agentic AI model, which has much more autonomy in making decisions. That might really require a new risk assessment as the agency really reviews, how to monitor the AI's decision making capability. Instead of constant adjustment, agencies can establish triggers for policy review, such as significant new federal guidance, maybe a new executive order, maybe a new OMB memo. They could tie policy review to emergence of entirely new categories of AI capabilities or risks. An example of this would be like moving to an agentic AI model, or perhaps choosing um, a different AI that's based on a diffusion model, for instance. It's also a good idea to set a periodic review cycle, maybe annually or biannually for that second tier core policy, and maybe semi-annually for more rapidly evolving areas like Gen AI guidelines. And that would be like that third tier playbook sort of idea.
I would think that each of the three tiers require a certain amount of input and are equally important. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I think that really when you're talking about that first tier, where you're setting forth kind of the long standing, evergreen parts of an agency's policy, that's just like commitment to these larger ideas like accountability and accessibility, human oversight. But that second tier and that third tier really require a lot of input, from not just policymakers but those that are involved with the end users of those systems.
So, with all that in mind, what specific steps can agencies take to create a culture of innovation and build an AI ready workforce, especially considering that's what we're leaning towards?
So this is the golden ticket question for everyone, right? I once had a senior leader say that culture change is like an aircraft carrier. It takes a long time to change directions and it's hard to turn, but once you get it going in the right direction, it's pretty unstoppable. And
Wow.
that's what I like to think about when I consider what kind of change agencies need to pivot to our new AI driven environment. It's going to be scary for a lot of people. It's going to represent a lot of change. But there are lots of things that agencies can do to enable responsible innovation, such as cultivating an agency culture that values responsible AI development and use, and one that allows the agency to learn and adapt organically. Having senior leaders that vocally embrace AI and foster an environment of learning and experimentation. Harnessing the energy of AI savvy employees. Tech is not only for the young. I think, we can all adapt to new technologies. But I do think there are some benefits for those who've grown up in a native tech driven environment. Making space for those voices is an important part of helping the entire agency adapt to changing technology. Establishing internal working groups or communities of practice to share knowledge about emerging AI can be very helpful, as well as creating controlled testing environments or sandboxes where agency employees can safely evaluate emerging AI capabilities. This is really important to help employees overcome a fear of interacting with AI tech, but they're able to do that in a safe and a secure environment. And finally, building relationships with peer agencies to share best practices and avoid duplicating development efforts. You can really see that emphasis from OMB in the M 2521 memo, where agencies, it's almost one of the first things that OMB highlights is to direct agencies to really share their knowledge with each other. But the takeaway here is that we really want to create an adaptive system that's built on strong principles and a learning culture. This approach allows federal agencies to build competence and harness AI's benefits responsibly, even as the technology itself continues its rapid sprint forward. While all of this can seem really daunting, I also hope that folks will recognize what an amazing opportunity we have to shape the technological future.
So if you had one thing that you would give someone to take away from this conversation, what would it be?
I think that probably the most important component is to be flexible and be willing to learn and grow with the technology. It really is an unprecedented moment in both our technological landscape, but also in the ways we approach our workforce. Um, it is change management is going to be incredibly important, as well as a willingness to listen, and just really, again, to be flexible and take those opportunities to um, really harness this technology in a way that's going to be so helpful to the government.
Well, I think you've given us a lot to think about, and I hope our listeners have learned as much as I have from your conversation. And I'll hand it back to Zach now with the thought that everyone should be reading the OMB memo and working to create a culture of AI, especially considering that three-tiered approach you discussed with us. Thanks everyone for listening, and have a great one.
I'd like to thank Grace and Rabia for taking the time to speak with us today. Given what Grace said, it's clear that any AI policy will require a number of stakeholders, adherence to varying federal policies, and education to keep up with a rapidly advancing technology. But it's clear that many within government believe the juice is worth the squeeze. So that means the work to properly implement this technology for safe and ethical use has already begun. Thank you as always for joining us for Clarity on Tech, powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. You can follow or subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to share with your colleagues and leave a 5-star review. For more data-driven analysis of today's professional services market and in-depth conversations with industry thought leaders, visit us online at thomsonreuters.com/institute and follow us on LinkedIn under the Thomson Reuters Institute. Clarity on Tech is a production of Thomson Reuters, copyright Thomson Reuters 2025.